Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 28th of October 2020. In this article, we'll be using two newspaper articles to cover the entire issue. So in this articles, we'll be covering about the India-Myanmar relations and also about the management of urban disasters and the topic of urban resilience as such. So these are the articles we'll be dealing today. So this article taken from the Hindu is titled India's Outreach to Myanmar. So this forms the part of the syllabus in GS2 where India and neighboring states or neighboring nations is one of the aspect. So we will have to understand what is the general importance of Myanmar to India. Myanmar is important for India because of the geographic, historical, cultural and economic linkages that we have with them. So for centuries together, there was an overall development of northeastern India states, and India and Myanmar relationship officially got underway with the Treaty of Friendship that was signed in 1951. So as per the principles laid down in this 1951 Friendship Treaty, there are certain areas of cooperation which are significant for both the nations. Now let us have a look at them one by one. The first one is the strategic importance of Myanmar to India. If you take a look at the border, it is almost 1643 kilometers long, and the geographical land border and maritime boundary in the Bay of Bengal is also a part of this. Also, Myanmar shares boundary with 4 states of India. What are these 4 states? Please go through the map. After going through the map, you can know that Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram in northeast India share the border with this country. Please go through this mapping very carefully because it is important from Prem's perspective. So we can definitely say after you look at the map that Myanmar is India's gateway to the Southeast Asia. India-Myanmar border is highly porous and it is not properly guarded because of the thick jungles. The terrain is very rough and it is located in a very remote place. The border areas are very underdeveloped and therefore insurgency activities occur at a very high level. So this insurgency prone area and the proximity to opium producing areas makes it vulnerable for internal security of our northeast states and therefore our entire country. So it is important to have proper relationship with Myanmar with respect to this aspect of internal security. Now if we talk with respect to trade and economy, the flagship initiative of India with respect to all the East and Southeast Asian nations is Neighborhood First policy and India's Act East policy. So, in order to have success in the holistic manner, the entire policy hinges on our relationship with Myanmar. So, bilateral trade is one significant aspect to ensure that this policy sees a success. So for that, trade becomes very important. That is the reason why India has started to focus upon the enhancement of value of trade from the 1980s itself. So as a result, today the value of trade is nearly 2.5 billion US dollars with Myanmar. Comparatively, it was just 12 million in 1980. So cooperation in the banking sector, investment and trade, and all the other areas which are traditionally a part of the trading sector are definitely engaged with Myanmar. So there is nothing significant or special point that you have to remember on this pretext. So this takes us to the next point, that is with respect to connectivity. Connectivity is very important for strategic advantage that we want to have in this region. So in this context, India is building the Kaladan multimodal transit transport. So if you take a look at the map, this is Bay of Bengal and this is West Bengal. So this Kaladan multimodal transport is a road, river, port, cargo transport linkage. What does it mean? For example, it starts in West Bengal and it moves through a sea route for 539 kilometers and reaches the Sitwe port in Myanmar. From Sitwe port, it again enters through road into Mizoram through the Kalethwa road. This road is called Kaletwa Road, and it finally enters Mizoram. So what this essentially does is it cuts down the cost of transport by moving through Bangladesh. So this Kaladan multimodal project will actually significantly cut down the cost of transportation. Apart from this, we are also having another connectivity project in the form of Asian Trilateral Highway. So this Asian Trilateral Highway will connect India to ASEAN. The road is expected to boost trade and commence even more trade and commerce in the ASEAN India Free Trade Agreement region. So this will connect India to the Southeast Asia as well. So this will actually improve our ability to transport more amount of goods, and it will increase the amount of trade that is happening between India and the other Southeast Asian countries. So that is the connectivity aspect. That is Kaladan multimodal project and the Asian Trilateral Highway. These are very important from prelims perspective. Please read about them. The next aspect that we have to talk about is the aspect of development assistance. So what is this development assistance? India gives out soft loans, or India has already extended 2 billion in soft loans. What are the soft loans? They are low interest or no interest loans which are provided to Myanmar for development of their country. It has offered to help Myanmar in various areas without any conditions. So India is also providing assistance in setting up institutions for education, especially the higher education sector, and Myanmar Institute of Information Technology is one such institute which is considered to be a flagship educational institute of that country. So India has given the investment required for setting up this institute. So there is also a new proposal which is suggested to set up an infrastructure and socio-economic fund for specifically infrastructure projects. So this is aimed at ensuring peace in the Rakhine state, where we will find Rohingya Muslims. So the logic behind this investment is, if India can actually safeguard the interests of Rohingyas in these areas, there will be less insurgency, and thus it will ensure peace in our entire region. So that is the logic behind investment in Rakhine region. The next aspect is that of defense cooperation. So when we are talking about defense, we have to talk about the bilateral army exercise, that is IMBAX. So what is this IMBAX? It stands for India Myanmar Bilateral Army Exercise, to build confidence amongst the armies. So Myanmar is a key partner in the fight to end insurgency in the northeast India, and therefore this exercise becomes a platform wherein both the armies can exchange information and come up with common protocols to deal with insurgency. So that is the significance. Also, there were a lot of instances where India has extended humanitarian relief to Myanmar in various instances. Say for example, when there were natural calamities like Cyclone Mora in 2017, India has given development assistance and humanitarian assistance during that time. India has also offered to support the capacity building in disaster risk mitigation. So these are the various dimensions in which we have to study about relationship between different countries. Another aspect that we have to focus upon is another aspect of the GS2 syllabus, that is India as a part of the multilateral forum. So what are the multilateral fora that India and Myanmar are together? The most significant one in the present context is BIMSTEC. So we have to understand that BIMSTEC has been one of the main fulcrum of Act East policy, yet we did not put enough emphasis on this. So in order to revive this BIMSTEC and make it a major multilateral forum, Myanmar also becomes important, and it will also further our objective of Act East policy. Now what is Act East policy is beyond the scope of this lecture, so please go back to your basics and read about this Act East policy and BIMSTEC. So this particular article is dealing with the internal issues of Myanmar and how India should deal with such internal issues. So there has been a lot of tussle between the pro-democratic forces and the status quoist in Myanmar. So what India should actually do is create conditions which are conducive to conduct democratic processes in that country. In order to do that, there should be a non-interference policy in internal politics. There are a lot of minute details which will be very difficult to retain for longer time for your mains exam. So the major takeaway from this article should be the fact that the democratic processes will be created when there is dialogue between the factions that are actually in a tussle. So India should create those conditions which makes this dialogue possible rather than directly intervening in this area. So this has always been the policy of our foreign policy, and the non-alignment movement is a testimony to this fact. Even today, when we are moving away from non-alignment policy, this principle of non-interference has been the hallmark of our foreign policy. In the concluding paragraph, the author mentions that Delhi should try its best to maintain a balance between Bangladesh and Myanmar. The reason why he is saying this is because the Rohingya Muslim issue has been a major cause of concern, because neither Bangladesh nor Myanmar are ready to take up the responsibility of rehabilitation of these Rohingyas, who are the stateless citizens that are present in the Rakhine state. So this issue will eventually have a fallout and affect India's policy of accepting refugees as well. There might be a possibility that the international arena would force India to take up all the Rohingyas, and this would actually alter the demography of that region, and it would have a devastating impact on the internal security aspect of that region. So it is an imperative for India to actually handle both Bangladesh and Myanmar and ensure that Rohingyas would finally have some rehabilitation in Rakhine state only. So this is the important takeaway from this article. The second article for the day is taken from the Financial Express, and it is titled Building Urban Resilience. So this is a very important topic with respect to GS1 urbanization, the society aspect of urbanization, and we can also look at it in the lens of GS3 topic infrastructure, and also how cities are engines of growth. So we can link it to GS3 topic of economic growth and inclusive growth as well. So this is the relevance of this article. Now let us have a look at the article and its present context. If we take a look at the overall aspect of resilience, now one might ask this question: why do we need to focus on this resilience? Just to put things into a context, let me give a brief example and a statistic. So about 1.4 million people move to cities around the world every week. So you can understand the scope and extent of migration. And this means that nearly 55% of the world's population now lives in urban areas. So such rapid urbanization will have multifold impact on various walks of our life. How we live, how we are actually straining our local capacities, how we are contributing to the increased risk from natural and human made disasters. All this makes resilience in urban centers all the more important. So as already spoken, more and more people are concentrated in cities, dependent on local services, dependent on local networks, and this increases the risk posed by natural and human made disasters. So to quote another example, Hyderabad has had the worst kind of rainfall in its 100 years of history, in the last 100 years of its history. The last bad flood that has actually impacted the way of our life in Hyderabad was way back in 1903, when we have had the worst flood. So the population of Hyderabad back then was just 3 lakhs, and just because there was no resilient infrastructure back then, nearly 25,000 people were affected or almost killed in this disaster. The same thing repeated in 2000 2020 again, but the population now is almost 1 crore, or the official figures are yet to come out. It can be greater than 1 crore as well. So we can definitely say that a lot of infrastructure has been created in this city to accommodate this 1 crore people. But is it resilient to the flooding pattern that we have seen? We have actually encroached a lot of lakes, and because of this reason, when the rainfall occurred in such a devastating way, the life came to a standstill. This shows that we are not ready to handle the fury of nature. So this calls us back to the need for having an urban resilient infrastructure. We often call our urban centers as engines of growth, but what kind of engines are these when they create a sea of poverty? If you take a look at the largest slums in our country, they are mostly located in some of the richest places of our country. For example, Dharavi slum, which accommodates nearly 15 to 20 lakh residents, one of the largest slums in Asia, is in the richest municipal corporation of Mumbai. That is the Brihan Mumbai Corporation we are talking about. So even during the pandemic, we have seen millions of people actually walking back to their homes because they are not in a position to afford any transportation because of the lockdown. So all this shows the kind of migration patterns, the kind of living conditions that we live in, and this brings us to the point that we have to build cities that are inclusive and are in tune with the nature's requirements. So this is the importance of building urban resilience, and that is what is being highlighted in this article. So how do we build this? Firstly, we have to focus on livelihoods. These livelihoods should be ensured in such a way that they are in tune with the sustainable development goals of the UN SDG goals, because unless and until cities are made the centers of these UN SDG goals, we cannot actually attain the UN SDG goals. Considering the fact that nearly 55% of the population lives in cities, it is all the more important to focus our entire responses in these cities. We have to make them conducive for even migrant labor. We have to make them conducive for every citizen, and the vision of smart cities should actually fructify in such a way that it includes the poor and urban migrants as well. So that should be the vision. Now how do we attain this? The first thing that we have to do is collect data. When we talked about the migrant crisis during the pandemic, even Supreme Court was left with a surprise because they didn't have any data on migrants. So we have to move towards a new urban agenda marked by data collection. This new urban agenda is a part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which incorporates the Paris Climate Deal and also the Sendai framework. So this should be the way forward as suggested in this article.